there's always the reason of, hey, did we know exactly where they were? And I kind of chuckled when I heard Nick Robertson say they notified the U.S. government and the Kabul government 30 minutes prior to the attack that they were there, and the bombing still continued.
Did you hear what that psychopath just said? He said, when he heard that innocent women and children, innocent doctors, people who went to good people who went to do nothing but help, were being blown apart in the most heinous, disgusting ways. This psychopath, and they called and said, hey, we're over here and we're the good guys and please don't drop any more bombs on us. And he heard that they continued to drop bombs for another 30 minutes. He thought that was funny. It made him laugh to know that good people are being murdered with your tax dollars in your name. This psychopath, you keep hearing me say psychopaths in the Pentagon, psychopaths in the White House. This is exactly what I mean. This guy, when he hears that innocent people are being murdered in your name, makes him laugh. It makes him want to chuckle. I just thought I should point that out. Thank you. Stay cool.
There's always the reason of, hey, did we know exactly where they were? And I kind of chuckled when I heard Nick Robertson say they notified the U.S. government and the Kabul government 30 minutes prior to the attack that they were there, and the bombing still continued.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We are always so grateful you take the time to wake up with us. Good morning, everybody. I'm Christy Paul.
I'm Victor Blackwell. Good to be with you.
Yeah, we want to begin with this breaking news out of Afghanistan this morning, where we have 9 staff workers of Doctors Without Borders, we've learned, were killed. 37 people are injured. This after U.S. airstrikes rocked a trauma center in the northern city of Kunduz. These are pictures we are just getting in. I want you to take a look here. Those are flames and smoke inside the walls of that hospital, and the walls then resulted in collapsing. Fragments of glass is littering that area, we're told, and doctors are now scrambling to treat the people who were injured, and they're doing so at a makeshift operating theater.
All right, another look at this video. First video in from the scene, now right after dawn. You can see the burned out shell here, smoke still billowing from some of these windows. Again, 9 aid workers with Doctors Without Borders killed, many still missing. We have this statement from the organization. We are deeply shocked by the attack, the killing of our staff and patients, and the heavy toll it has inflicted on healthcare in Kunduz. Let's go now to CNN international correspondent Nick Robertson in Paris, the city where Doctors Without Borders was founded. Nick, the U.S. military says that airstrikes may have resulted in collateral damage to a nearby medical facility. That's part of their statement. The U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan released this statement. Talk more about the bombing campaign that's been going on in this area.
Well, the Taliban took over the town of Kunduz, where this medical facility was, in the center of it, on Monday. 5 days ago, MSF, Doctors Without Borders, say that as recently as 5 days ago, they told not only Washington but Kabul of the GPS coordinates of this medical facility. It's quite a large, sprawling medical facility. We know that when the Taliban went into the city, they targeted the hospitals and went there looking for government troops, any injured government troops. We know that at the time of these strikes, that there was fighting in the vicinity of this hospital complex. We know from NATO officials that there were strikes close to there, and they say that the hospital could have been collateral damage. But what we are learning from Doctors Without Borders is that they say when the first strikes at the hospital, that they say have partially destroyed the hospital, that were on the hospital. Doctors Without Borders say when their staff first made them aware, they contacted, again, Kabul and Washington. And they said then the airstrikes on that facility continued for another 30 minutes before they stopped. We're told there were 105 patients in there, along with family members as well, and 80 Doctors Without Borders international and local staff working in that hospital at the time. So far this week, they'd already treated over 400 casualties of the fighting that's rocked that city between the Taliban and government forces, Victor.
All right, Nick, we're going to have the folks up in the control room put up the statement that we received from the U.S. Embassy there in Afghanistan. Let's put it up on the screen. It says the U.S. Embassy mourns for the individuals and families affected by the tragic incident at the Doctors Without Borders hospital and for all those suffering from the violence in Kunduz. That from the U.S. Embassy there in Afghanistan. Nick, back to you. How many medical resources are there? I mean, I'd imagine that there are very few, and now after this bombing and what we've seen of this new video, we can play that as well, guys, back in the control room, that there aren't many resources available.
There won't be. This medical facility was set up 4 years ago by Doctors Without Borders. They've been working in Afghanistan for decades. They probably saved thousands, if not tens of thousands of lives of people that have been caught up in the fighting over those years. Mine blast victims regularly come into these facilities, but they're important because in that region, it's the only facility that Doctors Without Borders has in the north of Afghanistan there, and as such will be a place that a lot of people will try to get to because they know they can get to first-class international doctors with good facilities. So it's hugely important in the general run of things, and utterly vital at a week like this where there has seen intense fighting in the city itself. In the previous months, the fighting's been just outside the city. So it's going to absolutely diminish the medical facilities that are available there. What we do know are that some staff, MSF staff, are being relocated out of there. So not only do you lose the facility, but you lose some of those important medical staff as well. And the fighting there, of course, is far from over. The government and the Taliban are still contesting it, Victor.
Yeah, and ramping up. Nick Robertson there for us in Paris. Nick, thanks so much.
Let's bring in Suna Engel Rasmussen. He's a reporter for The Guardian in Kabul. Suna, you are there in Afghanistan, and there are these reports this morning, and I want to piggyback off what Nick was saying, that the U.S. was warned prior to these airstrikes where this hospital was located. What can you tell us about what you know today?
And not just the U.S. military, also apparently the Afghan Ministry of Interior, the Afghan Ministry of Defense as well, and both the NATO mission and the U.S. military here. Sometimes these airstrikes are called in by the Afghan military, asking for assistance from the American military. So, and not only were they shared this week, but they would have been known prior to this whole fighting started on Monday. That's standard operating procedure in conflict zones normally, and that's obviously a lot of people here can't understand how this could happen, and there's a lot of anger towards U.S. In Kunduz, people are assuming that this was an American airstrike. There's no, among the people there's no doubt, and there's been this narrative over the past week that the Afghan forces can't fight the Taliban without assistance from the U.S. military, and an incident like this makes people question what's the use of the U.S. military anyway, when they are the ones who perpetrate the most damage in an incident like this.
We're seeing these pictures, as I can point out, that we're just getting in this morning, just have gotten them in the last about 15 minutes, of the scene there and of the flames inside that building when it was happening. We understand just in the last hour, the death toll jumped from 3 to 9. Also hearing that there are 30 people unaccounted for. What do you know about what's happening there at the scene right now?
Well, the 30 people unaccounted for, I think, was the previous statement they issued. Now they say 9 killed, 37 wounded, but they still say a lot of people unaccounted for. They don't put numbers on it. And that number, both accounts for staff and for patients. The 9 killed are only MSF staff. The critically injured have been moved to another medical facility in a place called Pul-e-Khumri, which is like 2 hours drive from Kunduz city. So this death toll and casualty toll is likely to rise over today and tomorrow when MSF gets a chance to really survey the damage done. But this apparently the building that was hit in the hospital was the main building where more than 100 patients with relatives were present. So and at the same time you had medical staff waiting outside the building to operate on patients coming in from all over the city. So this is a very busy time and completely packed facilities when this attack happened.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Sune Engel Rasmussen, we so appreciate your insight into this. Thank you very much.
The U.S. military has opened an investigation into this incident. Joined now by CNN military analyst, retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. Doctors Without Borders says that the precise locations were communicated as recently as September 29th, and that the bombing continued for more than 30 minutes after American and Afghan military officials in Kabul and Washington were first informed. Generally, your reaction to that and the typical degree of communication between the military and these types of aid organizations?
It's a great point, Victor, and I'll say a couple of things about this. First of all, it is under investigation. It proves how critically important precision weaponry is, and why some people who just claim we should go bomb things are uninformed about how the tragic occurrences like this might happen. First of all, my condolences to all those in Doctors Without Borders. This is a terrific organization that has been all over the world and in Afghanistan for at least the early 1980s. But the criticality of this, when you say it's under investigation, it could have been just the fluid nature of combat. There have been, in fact, Doctors Without Borders on their webpage earlier this week said they were right in the middle of the conflict between the Taliban and the Afghan security forces. They claim they were right there. So that leads a little stay to this, the fact that it's just tough to fight in these kind of areas and people get hurt. Secondly, precision weapons aren't always precise. You know, when you're thinking about this being equivalent to a video game, it is not. Sometimes these weapon systems miss their targets, and that could have been the cause for this. There's always the reason of, hey, did we know exactly where they were? And I kind of chuckled when I heard Nick Robertson say they notified the U.S. government and the Kabul government 30 minutes prior to the attack that they were there, and the bombing still continued. Well, you just don't turn these things on and off when accidents like this happen. You're in the middle of a fight. So it's tough to actually get that message from the embassy to the military to the person flying the plane to the ground spotter. There's a lot of people in the chain of communication on this. These things happen in combat. It's very unfortunate. It's tragic. Condolences go out to them. But this is what happens when the Taliban attacks in a city that was being secured by the Afghan security forces.
And again, the U.S. military has opened an investigation of this. Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, thank you. And we'll talk to you next hour about what that investigation looks like.
Sure.
Thanks.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.